Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast of the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church, where we have conversations about faith, discipleship, leadership, and the ministry that we share together. With me, as always, my co-host, Jesse Inez. Our other co-host guest today is an ordained deacon in full connection in our conference, a licensed clinical social worker, an accomplished nonprofit executive leader, over 15 years of experience, financial oversight, strategic operations, human resources. She earned her Master's of Divinity from Duke Divinity School. We can't all go to Emory, it's all right. And later completed her Master of Social Work at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Her ministry has brought together the life of the church, the work of social healing, and the demands of executive leadership in a way that is both distinctive and deeply needed today. She has served in the local church ministry at Wesley Memorial United Methodist Church in High Point and Centenary UMC in Winston. Throughout her ministry, she has also served alongside her husband, the Reverend Duncan Martin, in congregations across Stokes, Surrey, Davidson, and Mecklenburg counties. A mom of two 13-year-old girls who are rising 8th graders, she has recently served as Chief Program Officer at Thompson Child and Family Focus, where she provided executive oversight again for a large network across North Carolina. She carried the responsibility for $37 million portfolio within an organizational operating budget of $60 million. She comes to this work with the pastoral heart of a deacon, the insight of a clinical social worker, the experience of a seasoned executive, and a profound commitment to mission and ministry of the church. Ladies and gentlemen, clergy and laity, I give you our new conference treasurer, Director of Administrative Services, Meredith Martin.
Wow. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jesse, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Grateful that you can make it with us. I know at the time of recording, you are still within the month of your appointment. And so we're grateful that you were able to find some time to hang out with us today. Now, before we talk about the role itself, which is what I think a lot of people are going to be excited to hear about and also be interested to learn more about, I'd love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit more. And so, as we stated, you are a deacon in full connection, social worker, and a nonprofit leader. How do you tell the story of your calling?
Yeah, well, I think that I would just say that being able to come back to service at the conference through the conference treasurer is really an answer to prayer. I really began my professional ministry, as John mentioned, when I was in college at Wake Forest. I served at Centenary United Methodist and was one of the youth ministry interns, and really discerned my call and was, sent through their charge conference into my experience through ordained ministry, and really have always felt called to that connection of the church and the world. I really feel like God has given me an opportunity to learn a lot about nonprofit administration and most recently in more corporate nonprofits, like really learning best practices. And when the opportunity came back open with the conference treasurer, it was just like, wow, I really feel like I've been able to be formed by this conference and by this community in North Carolina. Again, just really, I feel like this is still an opportunity for me to live into my connection to connect the church with the world and bring in some of those nonprofit leadership skills. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those people who have supported me along the way. Of course, my family, but also the churches. My husband, Duncan, and I have served churches throughout the conference. Some of them have been very small churches, under 20 people in worship. And then I grew up at Myers Park Methodist, one of our largest churches. And so I've got experiences across the entire connection and really just feel like that call from God, the Holy Spirit, and the things that I have been naturally gifted with. But also this conference has been formational to me and loved me and supported me. And I really feel really fortunate that I have the opportunity in this role to serve it as conference treasurer.
Wonderful. So you have a lot of experience, a lot of very good experience for this. So I want to ask you how you think that your background has intersected to, what do we say? That perhaps we were born for times such as these?
Mm-hmm.
With time and your experience and everything for right now, how are you equipped for today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I'm still continuing to learn that. And every day as Jesse mentioned, I'm only on day 9 in this role. And so
how are you going to do everything?
Yeah, so I'm still figuring it out, folks. And grateful for the many people who are walking alongside me. But I think that, I've learned a lot in my first appointment after divinity school and social work school was at Wesley Memorial United Methodist, and that was really formational to learn how to be a pastor and to do all the different roles that we do as clergy. But I've really learned a lot. The nonprofits I've served over my career, one of them was Family Services of Davidson County. It was domestic violence sexual assault agency, and just learned how to really connect with all types of various stakeholders, whether that's the government, law enforcement, private churches, the faith community, et cetera. So there's just a lot of different ways I've learned how to network with lots of different stakeholders. And then I went on to serve at Cross North School and Children's Home, or now it's called Cross North Communities for Children. I was there for 8.5 years. Eventually was their vice president of programs. And, that gave me an opportunity to be across the entire, quite frankly, footprint of the Western North Carolina Conference. So I was just meeting with our disaster response team, and they're working in some of those counties that were affected by Helene, and I've got lived experience of working and serving children and families in those communities. And so I feel like, again, learning the actual different cultures within our conference. There's so many different cultures within this relatively small geographic area when you think about the whole of the world, or the whole even of the United States. Obviously growing up in Charlotte, that's one culture within our conference. And then, serving in Avery County is a completely different culture. And while we have folks that kind of spend time in both, I've learned a lot in my time of just knowing the people of this community, and, spending time in Winston-Salem. Spent a lot of my adult life living around Winston and in those rural counties around there. So, I just think that prepares me. And then I really think that a lot of the transferable skills from the social work industry, give a lot of guardrails that are helpful in ministry. There's a lot of real clear ethical practices within social work. And I think sometimes, I remember telling Duncan, my husband, that after I went to divinity school, we get a lot of, at least at Duke, we get a lot of theory, right? And so we're learning how to read the Bible. We're learning how to think theologically, which is obviously the point of divinity school. But then when you go to social work school, there's a lot of actual practical skills that we don't always get in divinity school.
What?
And those things, I remember being all y'all need to come over here and learn some stuff, because I feel like I learned a lot more of the practical things. And especially, I've always felt like social work ethics and Wesleyan theology dovetail really well, because we talk about practical divinity. And so that was always really helpful for me. My focus in social work school was management and community practice. And so that really gave me some what we call macro social work concepts to really help put guardrails in a helpful way around how we approach service and ministry. And so, again, those are, I think, just some of the ways that I feel like I've been prepared for this work. I just want to underscore again, feel really honored to have been given this opportunity, and, seek the whole conference's accountability and holding me accountable to doing this work well, because this is not about me. This is not about
That's right.
any of us. This is about how do we continue to steward our conference for the next generation of people, my kids. I want them to have a healthy United Methodist Church that they get to be a part of when they're my age.
Yeah. Well, to me, it sounds like you are fully qualified. In fact,
Thanks,
and
John.
I love the depth. I always, I feel like sometimes we can get 20 years of experience, but it's only this deep. So
Appreciate
we're
that.
grateful to have you.
Thank
Amen
you.
to that.
Thank you.
So on that positive note, you have started this new role. You've only been in for a few days. Anything happen? And what a segment we like to call strangely heartwarming. Has anything shocked you? Has been a slight surprise, or something has come along and you have felt your heart strangely warmed, unexpected?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think one of the things that's been really cool in this role is that we have a lot of people who have served our conference including our bishop for many decades, right? And these people have been mentors to me. They have been, many of my now closest colleagues in the conference office have supported me and cared for me and known me since I was 22 years old, and just discerning a call to ministry. And I think one of the things when you think about what's strangely warm your heart, it's been a really cool experience to have them welcome me as a colleague and leader.
Right.
Not that I
Yeah.
didn't feel respected by them before. I completely did.
Yeah, but it's different.
But it's like
Yeah.
this, obviously I'm younger than some of the other members of our leadership team here at the conference office. And I have felt completely respected and honored for what I bring to the table. And there's no so far at least, patting on the head, oh,
Right, 'cause
Meredith,
right, yeah.
you little,
Right.
young buckaroo. It's much more been a welcoming, we see you as someone we can learn from, and I absolutely see them as someone that I can learn from. And that really gives me a lot of hope and excitement as we think about, a lot of what has been a part of my career is, succession planning. Like when I left Thompson, I wanted to make sure that whoever comes behind me can pick that up and it be something that is easily transferable. And of course, whenever clergy in our itinerant system, you come behind someone, you find things that they didn't see. That's just a part of it. But hopefully if we're doing this work well, we are preparing for those because we are literally an itinerant organization. And so I guess what's been really awesome is just feeling, out. I definitely need to give a major shout out to Glenn Kinkin, who has provided me with a great onboarding. He obviously inherited from Mark, and so I appreciate what Mark King did prior to him, but, working directly with Glenn over the last couple of weeks, who's really given me the gift of a smooth transition. So I just want the whole conference to know that Glenn has done a great job in kind of his interim time. And all my success so far, I really owe to him. He's just a great person who loves this conference and has really set me up for so much success. So that has been a gift. And then just many of the other leaders, members of the cabinet, members of the conference staff, district superintendents, that has been really warming to feel so welcomed and supported.
Well, thank you for sharing all that. I think it's great to hear about your background. It's great to hear about your just a few days, like you said, 9 days of being in the role and that transition, and just really your heart and your philosophy, if you will, behind your beliefs and the things that you do. I think as we move into just kind of understanding what does the conference treasurer and director of administrative services do, for someone sitting in a local church pew, I know for a lot of folks, they might not even fully understand anything about our conference or even that it exists for the most part, right? Especially folks that are new to United Methodist churches. For someone sitting in a local church pew, based on your title, it might sound important, right? But also a little abstract. I'm thinking about Chandler from Friends and how none of his friends actually knew what he did, but he told them all the time. So in plain language, what does this role do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's so interesting you bring that up because I remember even people within our local church at Hawthorne Lane were like, is this a real job or is this you're just on a committee? And I was like, oh no, this is a job. This is a full-time job. So I think that's a great question and something that, maybe people don't know if they're not as aware of the financial operations of the conference. But, essentially, so, if I'm being very rigidly United Methodist, this is a disciplinary required position in each annual conference. And so you can go read about what both the conference treasurer and the director of administrative services are supposed to do in the discipline. But essentially, kind of in plain language, as you mentioned, it's essentially the CFO and / COO of the conference. And so the functions of the conference that really come up through the conference treasurer and director of administrative services are, of course, the finance and accounting practices. So we currently contract our accounting out to the United Methodist Foundation. They obviously also do our investments as our foundation. And so we have a great relationship with the foundation, and that is managed. And I'm the staff liaison on the conference side who's really supporting that and working very closely with the team over there to ensure we have excellent financial management. So that's really a huge bucket. And then human resources, that comes up through the conference treasurer's office. And so Dale Bryant, who manages our benefits and administration, everyone knows Dale if they have conference benefits. So that's really a part of this team. And Dale does a great job of keeping everybody insured and on track with all those pieces. And then the IT services are another piece of work that comes up under the conference treasurer. And so we have that as well. So Chris Hampton and his team, Alexa, we are, all working together to ensure like essentially the operations of the conference are functioning well. We also have the archives up under the conference treasurer. And so that's another piece that's run very well. But those are kind of like the major buckets of the work. And actually, one thing that people may not know is that the conference treasurer actually reports to CFNA. So my supervisor is CFNA, not any employee. And obviously, I'm serving in close connection with the bishop and with Amy Coles, our assistant to the bishop. But the conference treasurer, per the discipline, for a sort of a division of having that counterbalance is that I'm not the bishop. Of course, we respect and is setting the vision for our conference, but we kind of have that division to provide internal controls for the conference. And so Sarah Williams, who's the chair of CFNA, and our members of the CFNA team are technically my supervisor. Of course, I work closely with other members of this of the team. And so primary liaison to the trustees. So a lot of our legal matters work closely with Greg Huffman, our chancellor, who's our attorney essentially for the conference. We have, our benefits team, our health, our pension team. And so really ensuring that all of those operations run smoothly. Hopefully, if what we're doing is working, people don't really notice us because things are working well, right? So that's what the kind of goal is a lot of times. So those are the buckets of work, and I really see them as resourcing ministry, ensuring that we are accountable, that we have appropriate policies and procedures in place to protect our employees, our clergy, our conference in general.
I love it.
I'm grateful that we have Meredith and all of her gifts so that the conference never has to rely on me for anything like that.
I don't have.
No.
So okay, for folks in our congregation, how would you say your week looks like? Like, what does it look like? What do those responsibilities look like for you week to week? Or are you still trying to figure out what that rhythm looks like?
Maybe she has an ideal.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm on week 3. But yeah, no, I think that there's the tactical things that have to be completed to run a good business. And so, we're ensuring that that payments are going out that are supposed to be going out, and that when people send in their apportionments, that we're posting those appropriately and receiving those checks, and that people's benefits are paid. And I think that there's a lot of just kind of tactical work of running a business that is important, and that's being done on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of my role is also thinking strategically about how do we ensure that we have the most streamlined processes in place, that we're paying attention to what's going on in essentially like what we would say like the market. Like, so for example, all conference treasurers, there's like a conference treasurers listserv. And so, people kind of share knowledge across the connection around, like, one of the things that got sent across the email chain today was, does anyone have any policies on EV vehicles in parsonages and putting in an EV charging station in parsonages? Well, I think that's one of the like interesting things that we have this connection. So like, if that comes up here, I don't have to just like invent that out of thin air. We can kind of see what, I think it was, I can't remember which conference, but someone has tackled that one. And not that we do what they do, but we at least have a starting point. And I think that's a good example, and something I wasn't aware of until coming into this role, that like the assistants to the bishops all have a listserv together, and there's the conference treasurer and conference secretaries.
Amy is the director of communications. They have one too.
Right. So there's like a team where folks are really sharing knowledge. And I think that I see my role as really making sure we have good processes in place, and that we have the right staff mix to move the business forward.
So one of the things we're going to be doing is I guess over these next few weeks and months is building trust, right? Is having that relationship. Do you have a plan for how to go about, connecting to the local churches a little bit, or getting the message out to the local churches, connecting direct, trying to figure out how to word that exactly, but I think you know what I mean.
Right.
When you get to them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think right now, I mean, obviously I'm like I said, I'm in the early stages of this role. So I'm really spending a lot of time with our leadership in the conference, having like one-on-one meetings with them and just hearing from them. What do they feel like is going well? What do they feel like is something that they'd like to see done differently. And so, meeting with conference leadership, the district superintendents, and then members of the conference staff. Also, will be connecting with like the chairs of the committees that I'm the liaison to and getting their feedback. I spoke with Bishop Carter recently about, might it make sense for me to spend some time with him when he goes out and speaks to the districts around feedback from folks, on the ground. Certainly open to, a lot of people do reach out directly to the conference treasurer. And so I get people's emails. And I right now not sure if I know always the answer to some of their questions, but I'll try to find it. So, certainly want people to feel like they can reach out to me. I may not be the right person if they need something. A lot of times folks starting with their district admin is a great place to start because a lot of those women know everything. So I think that's a great place to start.
Yep.
But, I'm happy to hear feedback. I think that I bring a kind of a continuous quality improvement lens to the work that I do. And so I'm always open to hearing how that impacts people on the front line, essentially. We're the back end doing stuff that is important, but also, how do we make sure that it translates well and that people have what they need.
So the announcement about your new role says your leadership has consistently centered on stewardship, accountability, and mission. Those are words we use often in the church, but they can mean different things to different people. So when you use the word stewardship, what do you mean?
Well, I think about in this role, every dollar that's in our bank account here at the conference, like one of our grandmas might have put in the plate. And, I take that really seriously because, my grandmother was the, very involved person at Trinity United Methodist in Anderson, South Carolina. And, these people oftentimes, maybe not our families, but maybe our families, maybe ourselves, we have had to sacrifice to like support our faith communities. And we know that many churches take really seriously giving, paying their apportionments. And so for me in this role, like I take that really seriously, and every dollar, every check that's going out of here, we're needing to make sure that we're being a steward of that. It's not my money. It's not the program leader's money. It's not the DS's money. It's not the bishop's money. It is, it's money that we are returning for the glory of the kingdom. And so I think that is got to stay at the center of everything that we do. I think that we need to use business practices and run in some ways like any other business because that's responsible. But also I think we have to realize that this is not anyone's money. We can't get territorial about it. We got to learn how we can work together. And so that's, to me, that's what stewardship is. It's how am I being integritous in that way. And in some ways, like the buck literally stops with me. So I've got to be really serious about that. My name's on the checks now. So it's very serious.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I like it. It kind of, honestly, I don't know why my head just went to this, but I went back to the Old Testament, and when God made the covenant with the people, and was like, okay, my name's on it now. I take it very seriously from this point on. You're right. And you have skin in the game, essentially, is what that was, right? That covenant, that relationship, you are entering that relationship. I love that. That was so well said. Thank you.
Yeah, so you've led organizations. I feel like we've talked about the fact that based on your experience, I think I personally find you to be a very trustworthy person when it comes to taking care of our finances and taking those types of things very, very seriously, especially given the fact that, we are a church that's gone through quite a shakeup recently with churches disaffiliating. And so our finances have looked quite differently than they have in the past. And we have had to make certain adjustments because of that. And so I think one of the exciting things is just being grateful for your experience in that role as well. You've led these organizations serving vulnerable children and families and communities too. So it's partially a ministry for you, not partially, but I mean, I guess it's a balance between a business and ministry as well. I don't know if you remember this. This is really random, but a really long time ago when I was beginning my journey, discerning my call to be a licensed local pastor, you led a group of of us who are discerning our call in what does trauma look like, and what does it show up as, and things like that. And so I feel like you really do have a finger on the pulse, if you will, for all these different aspects of the ministry, but also that business sense as well. I think my next question is, like, what did that work teach you about stewardship that other folks in local churches, like administrative officers, the folks that deal with money on a local church level, like, how can we inspire them to talk about stewardship?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, thanks for that. It's so funny how many people are like, "You were that lady who taught me about trauma." So anyway, no, thank you. It's a great way for me to have stayed connected while I was in all of these nonprofit work. But yeah, so I think about one of the things I remember, and I'll give a shout out to one of our, my CEOs I worked for, Will Jones. He talked about there's no mission without margin. And, I remember when I was interviewing to be the chief program officer at Thompson, he was like, do you endorse this statement? And I was like, having to think, like, what does that mean? No mission without margin. And really, Will has done a great job of leading an organization that was in a financial, quite frankly, downward spiral to being very financially stable. And the point is that if we don't create a little bit of margin, meaning we either make more money than we're spending or we're being frugally responsible, we can't then take that money to invest in new things. And so, I think about that with some of the work we do as a conference, or some of the work even local churches might do, of how do you budget, or how do you think about how you spend money where you have some margin so that you can be creative in doing something new that is the mission of the church, that we're not just squeaking by. Sometimes that means you got to have hard conversations, right? And, sometimes that means you have to downsize your staff, or sometimes that means you have to fundraise more than you feel like you can, but you probably can do something if you have a compelling vision. And so I think that at this space, we do a lot of the apportionment dollars are used for margin imagination things. And so I hope that we can do a good job of ensuring that the grandmas, right, or the kiddos in the churches know that their faithful giving is used responsibly by the conference, by the districts, to do something with that margin that allows us to be innovative. We're not just trying to, yes, we want to pay the bills. Yes, we want payroll to go through, but we also are here to do something new and creative. We're here to make disciples of Jesus Christ, right? That's the point of what this work is. So I think, I hope that resonates or makes sense.
I'm
Absolutely.
literally taking notes. I just started a new appointment too, and I'm like, there's no mission without
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that.
Yeah. So for all you pastors, when stewardship season comes around,
You might be hearing there's no mission without margin a lot all around the conference now.
Please give credit where credit is due, right?
Yeah.
What you said, though, also resonated with me, because a few years ago when we were doing interviews with some DSs as they were kind of leaving their positions to move on to other things, one of the things I mentioned was that they were a DS during the hardest time it was ever to be a DS in the United Methodist Church.
Right.
Yeah, and they didn't complain, but it's just true that it was just the hardest time. And I was just sitting here thinking, you are coming in at one of the most challenging times into this position in the history of the United Methodist Church anyways. And there's not really a question behind that, except just a recognition and I'm glad you're all hands on deck and you're one of them.
Well, and I'll say it's I again want to give credit where credit is due, that those who have come before us have made really good decisions about the financial sustainability of our conference, and that we are very healthy in general, and then also very healthy when you think about comparison to other annual conferences around the connection. So it's important, I think, for folks to know it's not like yes, I appreciate that, John, acknowledgement of like coming in post-disaffiliation, post-COVID, all those things is tough. But it's definitely also I think that's where people had to make courageous, hard decisions. And so I think us as an annual conference we're also going to have to make some maybe unpopular decisions so that in 40 years, the people who are on this podcast or whatever they do by then, are like, wow, I appreciate that we have money that we can still have health insurance, or that we can still have a pension or
still
a
have those dreams you
401k.
were mentioning, the margin, and still having that ability to think creatively and all.
Right. So I think that some of those things we want are, we have clergy and laity, but, we have laity whose like professional jobs are to make business decisions. We want them to keep that hat on when they come to the table at church council or at a district meeting. Like, we want them to bring that perspective because they're professionally trained in that space and they can help us make decisions, because I'm grateful that some of these decisions are made. And sometimes, things might have to change in the short run because we're doing what's best connectionally from a time perspective, not just from a, across the world perspective. And it's, we are connected with those who have come before us, and hopefully we're thinking about those who will come behind us.
I love that. So if we're focusing on those who've come before us and honoring the work that they've done, but also thinking about those who are coming behind us as well, what questions should churches be asking about their own financial and administrative health in this season?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think it's always, obviously we have churches in this connection who are of all sizes. And so, some churches, really should do best practices around financial audits and getting opinions from external entities. Sometimes they can do a financial review that's not a full audit and it's more affordable. And, I think that, again, at the local church level, unfortunately, and again, I'm only in here 9 days, so I'm not speaking of a specific example, but I think we all know that without good financial practices at a local level, money can get misappropriated. People are desperate. People are dealing with stuff. And we need to protect one another from not making bad decisions. And so how do you ensure that you're following some best practices related to financial controls? And I realize that looks different at a church with 20 members than like Myers Park Methodist, but all of us can receive that dollar from the lady or man or individual in the pew, and we all have a responsibility to make sure that that's used for the kingdom's work and not misappropriated. And so I just encourage folks to educate themselves on what those are. If there's trainings, I think, that are available for folks, and feedback, I think, from local church treasurers and from pastors and people in the lay leadership as well, around like what is helpful, what has been helpful, what could be helpful in the future. And I think we have some of those resources already available through the conference and districts. And so how do we make sure folks have those? And if we don't have the right things available, how do we make them available so that we can be respectable institutions in our communities that people know they can trust, versus feel like, oh, well, I'm confused about that. I don't want anyone to be worried about. I might not know the answer right off the bat, but I'm committed to getting an answer for folks, because this is not my money.
Yeah. Give her some space, everybody. She's only been in the job for 9 days.
9 days.
9 days. That's right. I laughed when you said that, because I got appointed kind of late in the season. And on day one, I was sitting in my very first meeting, and somebody said, "What is your plan? For like your whole plan." And I thought he was joking. And I looked, and I remember thinking, God, if it had been 10 or 15 years ago, I probably would have made up, some sort of like, well, this neighborhood. And I just looked at him and said, I have no idea. I don't know you yet.
Yeah.
I don't know this community yet. I don't know you yet. Trust me, I'm going to fast track it, but like, I got to get to know you before I certainly,
Yeah. And shout out to everyone who is starting a new appointment in this season.
Absolutely.
We know that transitions, even transitions that we were hoping for, are never easy. And so blessings on everyone who is transitioning at this time and starting new roles. And we're grateful that you've answered the call to do so in this season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you one more question about your job now, and then one that has nothing to do with your job.
Okay, great.
So one of the things that I think and I'm not alone, I didn't come up with this, but the future of the church, there's going to be a lot of non-traditional giving means of bringing in income. Did I say, you know what I mean? How, in your opinion, how hard should churches that don't need to be, aren't there yet, should they be looking into these types of things in the future, even if they are not strapped yet? Or are there some that they should stay away from? Or are you maybe kind of stay away from that in general? I don't know. I'm going to ask the financial.
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I think that I don't know if I have enough behind me yet to respond to that. I think, again, it goes into each church knowing their community and figuring out what is like what they're called to. And, we know a lot of our churches have unleveraged space, and that, like, I know Wesley CDC does a lot of work with churches and thinking about creative space usage. And, I think that there's not an easy answer to that question, I guess, is sort of my initial
That's why
gut.
I saved it for the end.
So
9 days,
I think
you
that,
said, right?
right, 9 days. So I think that we have, I guess, in the side step of the answer, we have a lot of connected institutions within our conference, like Wesley CDC or the Foundation, and I'm sure there are others that are just not coming to mind at this moment, that can help resource us in responsibly doing those things, because I think you don't also want to get into this whole thing and then have unintended consequences. So I think that how do we be responsible in making decisions around those things? But I do think that it's a part of our Wesleyan heritage to like think outside the box around how ministry is done, and sitting on assets. Like, I mean, literally John Wesley birthed the denomination because like these physical buildings were just not doing it anymore. And I mean, we love our Church of England and Episcopal brothers and sisters and siblings, but how do we learn from our own history and thinking strategically?
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, because a lot of our buildings are getting older now, and a lot of churches are having to make that decision. Do we put our resources into restoring the old? Or do we put our resources?
And I don't think there's a right answer. I think
there's
each place has got their right answer, right? And so for some it's yes, and some it's no. And I remember when I spent a fair amount of time around Winston-Salem, and I remember First Baptist in Winston-Salem tore down their education building and built a parking lot. And I remember being like, what? But they had to raise $1.5 million to tear down their building. But they were spending so much money on keeping this building up, and they needed parking, and it ended up being the right decision for them. So again, like, I think sometimes you're like, what, you're going to tear down a building and build a parking lot? And that's the $1 million ask. But, that was the $1 million ask for them, because it was bankrupting their church by keeping this building up. And so I think I
was brave then.
Yeah, it was courageous, and they're thriving.
Absolutely. All right. Now, something nothing to do with your job. So what do you do for fun? What do you I know you haven't had a time the last 9 days, but before you went back into this, what do you do for fun? What's fun around Charlotte and Western North Carolina?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'm a parent to just teenagers. They just became teenagers, so young teenagers. So a lot of our free time is around, we have a softball player and a field hockey player in our house, so we do a lot of that. I'm a big reader. I'm constantly have like a physical book and an audio book, usually like a professional book that I'm reading. So I kind of have a couple going at the same time. So I love to read. And if anyone wants to just send me an email with a book recommendation, I would love that.
Yeah, we should have a corner for that, Jesse. We should
do
book recommendations.
Yeah, book recommendations, professional books or novels, whatever. I work out at Burn Boot Camp. I try to go like 3 or 4 times a week.
Nice.
So that's my physical health outlet. I like to sleep, which I think is important from like a clergy health perspective. Yeah, like I like to have a proper sleep health. And so, I think in this role, technically one of my titles, Glenn has told me, is like Chief Benefits Officer, or health benefits or something. And so, I feel like I've got to be integritous to like managing my own health so that I can advocate for all of our health.
If
And
you're doing
so,
burn boot camp, you're ahead of
yeah,
me.
well, I
She's
mean,
leading
you
the
can
way.
do it and
Sure.
it may or may not yield the results that you want it. But yeah, so, you know, my parents live in Charlotte. My in-laws live at Lake Junaluska. So we have all of our immediate family is in North Carolina. And so we spend a lot of time. And of course, you know, when you're a clergy family, church is the what's happening every weekend, you know? It just comes
Gotcha.
around every weekend. So,
It sure does.
but we love Hawthorne Lane. That's where Duncan's appointed right now. It's a great church. I'll give them a shout out on the podcast.
Love it.
Wonderful intergenerational church in Elizabeth neighborhood of Charlotte that is just welcomed our family and loves our kids. And
That's so
they're
important.
yeah, Jenny and Kate, you know, as Duncan and I are clergy members of the conference, you know, we're not members of Hawthorne Lane, but they got confirmed last year. And so they're very proud of the fact that they are members of the church, but we are not.
Oh, that's great.
So they're excited. And they learned, and I told David Hockett that they have been coming to annual conference every year because they were born on June 18th, which is like always at annual conference.
Yeah.
And so, of course, when they were born, we missed it. But every other birthday has been an annual conference. And so they realized that they could be conference delegates if they wanted to. And I was like, David, you know, if you ever need a young adult delegate or youth delegate, you know, Jenny and Kate Martin are available. So
I love that.
hopefully they can represent at some point.
All in.
I love that. Well, Meredith,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
I think we've
Thank
learned
you all.
a whole lot. I think we've learned a lot. We've also been inspired a lot. And then John also has a theme for his upcoming stewardship campaign as well. So
I do.
everybody
Absolutely.
wins in this podcast.
That's right. That's
Seriously, though, thank you so much for your leadership, for everything that you bring to the Western North Carolina Conference. We really appreciate your time today. And I hope that folks feel like they have a better understanding of what you do, but most importantly, of who you are. So thank you.
Well, thank you all for having me. I had just a great time talking to you and appreciate you all's ministries as well.
We love it. We're just trying to connect people, right?
Yes,
The
absolutely.
connection's
Love it.
the future.
Love it.
We had this long-standing thing where these, I'm going to say semi-isolated, but you know, we were because we were self-sustaining. Almost every church was. And now that's just not true. And for those of you who are still self-sustaining, help somebody out.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. We're gonna have to get more and more connected. So thank you, Meredith. Thanks to all our listeners, to the Means of Grace podcast. May we continue to discover how God's grace meets us not only in worship and service, but also in faithful stewardship of the resources that have been entrusted to us. Until next time, grace and peace.
Grace and peace.
Bye. Thank you all.